Guys, I'm Dejan Kovacevic of DK Pittsburgh Sports, and this is double shot of Steelers that comes your way at 4 p.m. every weekday. It won't on Friday. We're not going to have a show on Friday, but there's not really all that much to talk about, so it's not that bad. You want me to BS you here? There just isn't that much to say. I told you guys, these 5 weeks are the absolute worst on the football schedule. And you wouldn't think that necessarily because, you're getting closer to training camp and you're getting near, the real activity, and you just got done with, it is dead. DEAD, dead. There's nothing. Everybody disappears. There's no moves. There's just almost nothing to talk about, as James Chamberlain correctly points out. That said, every once in a while, something will happen. The Ravens made a move today. And the Ravens picked up Jaire Alexander, who is a very, very good corner. Now, this is somebody who's been discussed quite a lot on a lot of fronts lately, but including people, you know how that is. Somebody becomes available and it's, Steelers should get him, regardless of who it is or whether they fit or whether, even if they're an edge rusher. Oh, yeah, Steelers should get him. Well, that all works out well logically on the Steelers front because they're not going to do that in 99.999% of those cases. But then when you see another team in the AFC North get that player, you kind of, you kind of get a little squeamish about it. The Ravens had, past tense, one screaming shortcoming in the early part of the 2024 NFL season, and that's that they couldn't cover anybody. They were getting blown up for big play after big play after big play. Now, to John Harbaugh's credit, he ate some ego, and he went and found Dean Pease out in retirement. I believe Coach Pease is in his mid-70s. And he just said, Coach, I don't have any answers for this, and I need some help. That takes, whether it's false humility or whatever, it's still humility. It still takes putting your tail between the legs a little bit to get that done. Needless to say, Coach Pease comes back. He looks at what's wrong, and he fixes, he just fixes everything. The Ravens weren't excellent in their secondary the rest of the way, but they were plenty good enough considering everything else that they have on that side of the ball. And of course, everything that they have offensively. And now they go and they shore that up with a third CB1 type. And that makes you wonder, made me wonder, did the Steelers do enough to keep up or to keep pace or to get ahead of the Ravens? For that matter, you can throw in the Bengals and the Browns too if you want. I just didn't see anywhere near enough from the Bengals defensively. In fact, I didn't see much at all from them defensively, what they needed to add. They kept Joe Burrow's toys in place is what they did this offseason. That's what they tend to do. And the Browns just look like they're going to be old school Browns. I mean, I don't see anything happening up there. But where the Ravens are concerned, there might be something there again. And they might have gotten better. And I wonder where that leaves the Steelers. Now, you can say, listen, one way or another, they got to play each other twice for sure. And they're going to split those games because they're going to split them regardless. The Steelers are going to split, or Steelers are going to win one game, whether they're in last place or first place. The Ravens are going to win one game, whether they're in last place or first place. That's just how it's been going for quite some time. But we'll see where this ends up here. We're going to talk about this when we come back and bring it up with Chris Halleck. All right. At DK Pittsburgh Sports, we take pride in coverage that connects our city's fans to their favorite teams. Now, that connection's stronger than ever. Introducing our all-new state-of-the-art app. Find expert inside reporting and original podcasts. Check live box scores. Track the latest stats. Chat it up with our community of thousands of fans, all in one place. The new app from DK Pittsburgh Sports. Coverage that connects. Yeah, Denny pops by and says either the Ravens ruined the Steelers season or the Steelers ruined theirs. I prefer the latter, but then I might be biased. Hi, Chris.
Hey, what's going on, DK? How are you?
What's going on is that the Ravens added another corner, and I'm old enough to remember when everyone was saying, hey, it's okay to play Baltimore because all you got to do is put the ball up in the air.
Yeah, that was early on in the season, man. Like first half of last season, the Ravens could not stop anything when it came to giving up chunk plays through the air. But yeah, like as you mentioned in the opening segment, man, they brought in some help, made some changes. Nate Wiggins took a gigantic step forward for them because of it, and they cleaned up a lot of stuff by doing that. Once they stopped giving up those chunks through the air, they became a very, very dangerous football team.
You know, it's funny that there's a lot of discussion, especially as it relates to baseball, about advanced analytics versus old school scouting versus the eye test and all that other stuff. It's amazing to me that it's still going on, but it is. And that's in large part, I have long believed, because you have a group of people who are, especially with the analytics community, who work within analytics as if they are a cause as opposed to a tool. Did that make sense? Like they want the analytics to win so that the analytics win. Okay, so that they can make a case that analytics are everything. And then what ends up happening is that everything skews into that direction.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's always this boomerang effect in sports. There's always been that. This goes across all sports. It's kind of like when we talk about, the NFL is just a passing league now. Never pass. You're never going to see anybody run the ball again. Guess what ended up happening? The NFL is never going to be again about about big, strong defenses. It's going to be forever and ever and ever about linebackers who can cover and whatever. I guarantee you, at some point, somebody somewhere is going to recreate Hardy Nickerson, Lawrence Timmons, and stick them in the middle of their field and have not an old school, an ancient school linebacker approach. Now, they might not succeed at it, but somebody's going to try it. And if somebody does succeed at it, it's going to be, whoa, we should be trying that approach. Things are cyclical.
Mm-hmm.
When you're talking about football, and when you're talking about the way these analytics come together, you're really talking about a team that's you're talking about a situation where you can bring back an old guy and just tell him, look, coach, can you just take a glance at this secondary and tell us what's wrong? And he comes. It probably takes him about 8 seconds. Coach Pease.
Yep.
The same way it would Coach LeBeau.
Mm-hmm.
If Coach LeBeau could walk into that facility over there and look at everything that the Steelers did wrong defensively in that playoff game against the Ravens, every single thing, and say, wow, here was your real problem. It's not this, as you seem to think it is. It was actually this. And then you would make smarter, but you're never going to see that from this head coach. You're never going to see Tomlin do what Harbaugh did. Never, ever, 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 ever. I really believe that.
In a mid-season, I agree on the mid-season. I don't agree when it comes to making. Let's see. What's the best way? To me, Brian Flores and Arthur Smith are the two hires that kind of trump that, but those are not mid-season. Those are obviously off-season.
Brian Flores that was a different case in general.
It was a different case, but he also didn't have to be the one to pick up the phone and be like, hey, dude, I'm going to give you a job. I'm gonna make sure you stay in the gig, because what's going on throughout the league right now, you're kind of getting dealt a bad hand. I'm gonna make sure you still have a job and prove that you still belong. So that was a bit of a different case, but again, I think we're starting to see Tomlin peel back on some of those stubborn ways, but that's usually not stubborn people don't typically change that much.
No, and it's one thing. This is why I use the term humility here, because it's one thing to just go and hire a coach who's really good. I don't think Tomlin has a problem with that. I really don't.
Yeah.
Okay. I think in this specific circumstance, and it was specific, like you said, it was mid-season. It's a guy coming out of retirement. What you are saying, if you're Harbaugh, is John Harbaugh, don't have answers for this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? I just don't. And I know less about how to fix this than you do, sir. And could you please come back and help us out here for a few weeks? We would really appreciate it, because you can do something that I can't do. Chris, I'm sorry. There's no circumstance in which that would ever happen with this guy. None.
Yeah.
Now, through the season, Coach LeBeau, it's Mike B. No chance.
To be fair, I'm trying to think of something in which the Steelers were that bad at one thing throughout Mike Tomlin's tenure. Like
I can come up with one.
Okay.
When they were in Minneapolis and they got gashed and Mean Joe Green calls them out.
Right. But
were they the Dalvin Cook game?
Right. So that was 2021, and I remember 2021. They were god awful against the run. Like they were
at that time it had reached epic crisis mode. That game in Minneapolis was just a total like franchise breaker.
Yeah.
They were emasculated. They were embarrassed. It was a night game, prime time, and they could not stop the run. Like a high school team, they could not stop the run.
And yes, now we did see Tomlin and the team make changes, but it wasn't until after the season. That is when Brian Flores was hired. There were some other, coaching and personnel changes that were made, and they were a lot better against the run the next year. So that was something those players took to heart as well. But no, I do see what you're saying, and I agree. There's no precedent to believe that Mike Tomlin would make that kind of decision in the middle of a season. The only other time that I think we could really, really point to, it wasn't adding somebody, it was firing somebody, and that was firing Matt Canada, obviously mid-season. That was something he wanted to do before the season started, but that didn't get to happen.
So to swing back to the original point here is that the Ravens did get better.
Yes, they did.
The Ravens had, by every accounting, a really solid draft. They usually do.
Mm-hmm.
They usually do some very smart, listen to me, smart, Baltimore, right? Of all words to totally screw up like that, how about smart?
I mentioned The Simpsons yesterday. Immediately, I went to I Am So Smart, SMRT.
SMRT, that's
SMRT,
right.
Yeah.
Is to God, what was I just saying now? I'm so smart.
Going back to the Ravens making, having a good draft class.
They got better. And even today, when the Alexander signing was made, the typical reaction was, yep, that is the most Baltimore thing ever. Because he's out there, we're all talking about him, and the Ravens get him. Now, first off, before we get to the Ravens, did the Steelers do enough to address their secondary, specifically their corners? Did they do enough, Chris?
Outside corners, yes.
Outside corners is all I'm talking about.
Yes, absolutely. You have Joey Porter Jr. already. You're not going to pull the plug on him. He had a phenomenal rookie season. He kind of stagnated a little bit in year two, but he got better at certain things like tackling and still better. Still shut down receivers every now and then, but also took more penalties. So some improvement, some regression, but overall it wasn't a bad year. So you still got Joey Porter Jr. there. Darius Slay, the only rebuttal I ever see from anybody about Darius Slay is his age.
He's
nothing,
old. Yeah, there's
nothing else.
Right?
Absolutely nothing else. And even if somebody wants to say, oh, well, he didn't have any interceptions last year. Well, he did have one in the playoffs, and that's when those kind of plays really matter. And by the way, his coverage numbers are ridiculously good. He's still up there with some of the best cornerbacks in the league in terms of, keeping the receiver from catching the football, which is kind of the whole job of being in the secondary. So he's really good.
It's speaking of analytics and the value, legitimate value of analytics, you can try really, really hard to balance the value of X number of turnovers generated, takeaways generated in the course of a season versus just plain old steady play. It's a discussion that we were having in a forum just yesterday and talking about Deshaun Elliott planning, apparently, according to what he told me there, you saw in the video, that he wants to, if he has to sacrifice some tackling in order to swat the ball away from a few more people, he's willing to do that. And I'm kind of like, really, dude? Just kind of go with what was working. That was really, really good. It was a great look for you, making every single tackle and setting the NFL Next Gen stats record for doing that. But, if you're getting 5 picks, is that what Dante Jackson had, 5?
Yes.
That's a lot of picks, man. Okay.
A lot of picks. It's a lot of being in the right place at the right time. Yeah.
That's a lot of being in the right place at the right time and executing the play.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But having Dante Jackson impacted the way that you want to use some of the other guys on your defense. Again, you can look at certain tendencies, and one of the things that I wanted to do, and I did it earlier in the offseason, was why in the heck was Minkah Fitzpatrick misused? And so I went back to his 2022 season in which he tied for the NFL league lead in interceptions, where he was, Minkah. He was the Minkah that everybody thinks of when they think of the best version of him. The Steelers' defense on those weighty downs, on third down, were in man coverage way more often than they were last season. Mm-hmm. Why is that? Well, Tomlin, first off, obviously didn't trust his defense to be in man coverage in those situations because he did in 2022. He's proven it in the past. So why are the reasons? Why wouldn't he have done that? And Dante Jackson's a big reason why, in my opinion, because he's just not a great man coverage corner. He's a good zone coverage guy. He knows how to pick a guy up when he goes into his zone, pass the guy off when he leaves his zone. He knows how to do all that stuff. But when you ask him to press up against a receiver and stay with him, run with him, it's inconsistent, man. And it was all over the tape last year.
So let's say that Slay stays at the same level that he was last year, that he does not have a drop off for age. And everyone will tell you the history of sports, that when the end comes, it comes in a big hurry, and no one was like, oh, really? But he was so good last year. Doesn't matter. Now, let's presume that does not happen. Okay. Mm-hmm. And there's no reason to believe, other than being cynical here, that it will. And that somehow Joey Porter in particular can find a way to, he's got to improve his reputation with the refs. He just does. He knows that. He talks about it openly.
Yep.
And they're watching for him, and they're anticipating all the handsiness. Mm-hmm. They got one hand on the flag every time they're watching him. Okay. Yeah. And that can't happen, because then you become a liability, because teams are just going to throw to you, even if they're incomplete. They're going to do the Flacco thing to you. They're just going to run up flags on you. Okay. Let's say that he can do that. And let's say that some of the stuff that we talked about yesterday with Elliott and Fitzpatrick, you can move them in a different shape, in a different form, so to speak, as safeties, that you can maybe get Minkah to be more dynamic than he's been.
Yeah.
You can have a pretty nice secondary.
Agreed.
The thing that concerns me is that, at least to my knowledge, and I'm not a Ravensologist, okay? We see them 2 and maybe 3 times a year. But when I saw them last year, I saw a team that had one truly noticeable, visible, and damaging weakness, and then they didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, look, there's a reason everybody's going to pick them to win the division.
Yeah.
And probably nobody's going to pick Pittsburgh.
I'm not. There's got to be a lot to change between now and September for that to change. No, the Ravens.
What's the separation though?
The main one to me is quarterback. Even with Aaron Rodgers now, it's
you like Lamar more than you should, but that's just me.
I'm sure he's won 2 MVPs. Very convincing case he should have won a third. Very convincing case.
Very convincing case that he's also part of their problem when they get into the bigger games in the playoffs. I don't just mean against Pittsburgh.
Hey, I'm not talking about playoffs. I'm talking about winning the division. I'm talking about winning regular season games.
All right, that's fair. I brought up the division. Yes, in the regular season, he's going to make a difference. And for the most part, at least until the Steelers decided to try some psychotically stupid approach in the playoffs to shutting them down, the Steelers had been very effective against Lamar, obviously, for a very long time. And then they said, let's do something dumb. See how that works. No, come on. I'm not wrong on that.
It worked the first game, though. That
worked for the first 100 games.
Well,
the meetings.
I'm talking about like this new approach that they had. And I think the main reason why they felt like they had to change things up was they were watching all these teams but in the 9 or 10 games leading up to that first matchup. Every time they run the read option, teams would keep that edge rusher back and make sure Lamar wasn't the one to keep it, and then Derrick Henry would just eat them alive. And so the Steelers were like, no, screw this. We're not going to let Derrick Henry run all over us. We're going to make Lamar keep it and dare him to run. Now that sounds dangerous. And in the first game, it worked. Lamar ran the ball, I think 3 or 4 times in that entire game. All right.
It really worked in that game.
It did. But I think by the time December and January rolled around, the Ravens were like, yeah, see, we don't mind Lamar running so much now because now, things really matter now. And this is when you pull out all the stops, because especially when you get to the playoffs, because if you lose, you're not playing anymore.
He ran without reservation.
Yeah.
In that playoff game. And I don't know. I think you're exactly right here. I don't think the Steelers expected that. I don't think they expected him to just be, hey, listen, I really don't care if I'm banged up. I don't care if I get hurt or whatever. This is just what I do. I'm going to run.
Yeah.
I'm not going to save myself for the next round.
And that's what Corvo says here. Lamar, one good hit and it's over. That's what I'm talking about. Like, that's the danger you have with a running quarterback is, yes, I mean, there is not a quarterback that is more dangerous in terms of what he can do with his arm and his legs than Lamar Jackson. But all it takes is one hit and he's out, and the Ravens' chances of even winning the division are diminished. They're gone. You don't win without Lamar Jackson if you're the Ravens. So it's a gigantic risk, and you have to mitigate that risk by being like, okay, Lamar, I know you want to run, but we got to have you on the field. But I think, again, by the time December and January roll around, especially once you get into the playoffs, it's like, dude, all bets are off. Like, we got to win football games now, because we don't win, it's over. We're not playing anymore.
Dwight Jefferson says that the Steelers need to go big against the Ravens no matter what. Just go with a 4-2-5 with 3 safeties. No, and I get what Dwight's saying.
That's what they do.
No, I get what Dwight's saying. Okay, well, they do a lot of different things, and it cannot be overstated. I'm sorry to repeat it for a 10th time on this very episode, but what they did was so dumb. And then to cling to it into the third quarter is just, well, it's the stuff we were talking about earlier. I can't possibly be wrong. I can't be this wrong. Well, guess what? You're wrong, and you really were wrong. And it took you until halfway through the third quarter watching TJ Watt tackle ghosts.
Yeah.
And then having TJ look over at the sideline and go like this, like, what am I doing here? Seriously, what am I doing?
Yeah. I mean, listen, there's a gigantic misconception that, and Peripheral Saint says this, they adjusted, the Steelers didn't. That's actually not true. They just, every time the Steelers adjusted, the Ravens adjusted again and always stayed one step ahead. I went back and watched that entire 299 game. They adjusted on the second drive. They, instead of having Minka be the one to
Pittsburgh did.
Yes.
Okay.
Instead of having Minka be the one to be responsible for Lamar, because that made zero sense. You're running from 30 yards away from the line of scrimmage to go tackle the quarterback. They had Patrick Queen and Peyton Wilson be the two guys who would be the ones who swung around behind the edge rusher and then take out Lamar, trusting that Lamar would be the one to keep it since the edge rusher was crashing down, then have the linebackers pretty much abandon their gaps to go get to the edge. And that's what they did, and it worked. Then the Ravens adjusted again, started using tight ends to throw off what the linebackers were doing, and then all bets were off. And the Steelers never adjusted, were ever able to properly adjust back. And even when they did, this is what Patrick Queen was telling me. All it took with this strategy here was for one guy to screw something up, and everything crashed down. Everything. So all it took was a defensive tackle not winning a block, or an edge rusher not crashing down properly, or a linebacker not filling this gap instead of that gap. And then literally the entire strategy just completely implodes. It's a gigantic risk that did not pay off. So yes, they need to do something different because it didn't work. I'm not making excuses for it. It was terrible. I went back and watched the dang thing and still want to put a bullet in my brain afterward. But man, it was awful across the board. Just bad.
You know, Robert Sham reminds that Bill Cowher said at the time to rush the quarterback. And if you think about the foundation of what the Steelers have done over the years, it's been so effective against Lamar, is that they've gone after him and they've collapsed on him.
Yeah.
And in the process, trusting that they have edge rushers who are not just eminently capable, but elite at sealing the edge between TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith. You're using your best weapon, TJ, and another of your best weapons in Alex to their maximum. Go in there, either get him or get something. But to get clever, just go close the thing up. It worked for years.
Yeah.
Just go close it up.
That's what they needed to do, especially. And I think for the most part, when the Ravens threw the ball, I think they maintained a very similar approach. It was everybody stay in your gaps. Nobody try to do anything overly special. Don't try to, telling the edge rushers, telling TJ and Alex, okay, listen, you have to go out wide because you don't want Lamar you don't want to give Lamar the ability to then run to the outside and be able to make anything happen there. And then you got to tell the defensive tackles, listen, you have to stay pretty much where you are so that Lamar can't step up. You're trying to encircle him. And they pretty much did that. The problem is that they let the Ravens run up. If you were to add up the number of rushing yards that they put up, I think it's over 500 in the two final games, in the two times.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Over 500 rushing yards in those two games in Baltimore last season. Yep. That's the reason why they lost.
See, Paul Greiser says hard to rush the quarterback with Derrick Henry standing behind him. Well, he was either standing behind him or next to him or whatever, but he was constantly an option. Okay. And they were together. But there is a way to do that. Yep. And that's the part that we really don't talk enough about. There was a bad strategy. Okay. There was a gross misuse of your best player and your strongest position in general, edge rusher. Mm-hmm. But it's also okay to tackle Derrick Henry with any of the other 9 players on the football field.
Yeah.
That didn't happen. Yep. And that's where personnel came into it.
Yep. That's why they beefed up the defensive line. Yeah.
That's why they did the defensive line, and they realized the real reason that this thing, well, one of the reasons that this thing failed the way that it did was that we didn't have somebody or multiple somebodies capable of the simple tackle the running back. Is Derrick Henry great? Yes. Is he headed to the Hall of Fame? In all likelihood, yes. Okay. And he's just going to keep adding to that ledger and really ensure that he gets in. Can he be tackled? Also, yes.
Right.
Okay. But if the other team knows that if all they do is apply a little bit of an extra emphasis on blocking 97, and he's the only guy that you have to worry about on that line, or really between the line and the linebackers, it becomes academic. Now, I feel obligated to throw this in as well, because I can't get through this subject without bringing this up. But you also had an individual on your defense who had 14 bleeping tackles and who was really, really good against the run and was the exact opposite of your problem that day. And they just let him walk for nothing. Landon Roberts, of course. Still makes it's just illogical. I'm not suggesting he's, Lawrence Taylor or something, okay? Within the scope of what we're discussing here, it's beyond illogical.
Yeah.
How do you look at Landon and say, nah?
The only thing that I can think, and again, there's not an answer to this question right now, I don't think. Because the only thing that makes sense to me is, after having my conversation with Patrick Queen, is they have a specific idea for how they want to play defense this year, and it will be different. Everybody's going to hear that and go, okay, Chris, all right, sure. But they are making some changes, and I can't go into specifics based off of what I saw, but when I watched the defense during OTAs and minicamp, it looked a little different. It wasn't, we're not talking like they're going to go cover 4, play quarters all the time. They're changing to a traditional 4-3. I'm not talking about those kind of changes. I'm talking about trying to say things without getting too specific. It's going to be different with the way they play up front. I'll put it that way. There are going to be some changes. And so maybe for what they're asking the linebackers to do, because Landon, for as great as he was against the run and as surprising as he was against, or like in pass coverage, still not like great, but way better than expected based off of his history. I think they have a certain way that they want the linebackers to play this year, because when you look at their 3 primary guys, Patrick Queen, Peyton Wilson, Cole Holcomb, they're all very athletic, very fast, can defend both the run and play in pass coverage.
Can they?
I mean,
we saw signs at times last year where that wasn't a very good look for this inside linebacking group, other than Landon. Okay. Right. PQ had his games, and he talked about it openly. Cole Holcomb obviously wasn't healthy. Peyton Wilson had times where he did not look like he was going to be somebody who's going to be a solid inside linebacker tackler. And I think these are things that are very real issues, very real concerns for this team. You can't just wave a magic wand and get everybody excited about a couple of draft picks and say, yeah, that's going to be solved. You can't just say we're going to bring Minka closer to the line of scrimmage. You can't. There isn't something there where it's just it's not going to get fixed right away. Now, I'll also reiterate that the run defense was never this bad. Okay, right. Meaning the circumstances of having all those similar type pounding you opponents happening in a real tight schedule. Just boom, boom, boom. Philadelphia, everybody just boom, boom, boom. And you're like, you didn't have a chance to come up for air if you're the Steelers. That also was real. But when I look at what's going to be the difference between Pittsburgh and Baltimore this coming season, overarching, all 17 games, but especially the meetings between the teams, which tend to define who wins the division. Okay, right. Let's not forget that. Okay, these things tend to get settled amongst them. Like all the other games are just kind of like window dressing. Okay. But when they go against each other, they're playing for the division.
Yep.
Okay. When the Steelers played the Ravens the second time, they had the division in their control.
Yep. If they would have won the game, they would have won the
They would
AFC
have won
North.
the game. They would have been celebrating right down there, run the North, whatever. They would have been putting on the T-shirts down there in that god-awful room. And it is. It's some of the worst visiting circumstances in professional sports.
It's terrible.
With all due apologies to the Cubs in Wrigley Field, which at least has an excuse. You know, it's older than dirt.
Yeah.
The Cubs have an excuse. The Ravens don't. The Ravens do it on purpose, and it's unprofessional.
Yeah, they literally, there is literally not one place to put your foot onto actual floor when you're in the
We're talking about the players, not us. We don't matter.
Oh, I know we don't matter. I'm even talking about the players.
Yeah, they can't even budge.
Yeah, like the players don't have.
They're like veal in there.
Yeah.
Chris is going with the veal thing. Going, what the hell, veal?
Oh no, I know. I know what you're talking about. No, I really do think ultimately the biggest divider between the Steelers and Ravens right now is still quarterback. That's just what I think. But I also think the two teams are a little bit closer than a lot of outside perception, and that's just because
you gotta fight you on this quarterback thing. It's not that I don't think Lamar is good. Okay, I'm not blind. I'm not an idiot. It's that if you stop the Ravens from running, you win.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
No, yeah. He's not
and he's not going to beat you with his arm. He's not going to beat the Steelers with his arm. It'll never ever happen. He'll never beat a good team or playoff games with his arm. He just won't.
He almost beat the Bills last.
Didn't.
He didn't. I know that.
Never does. This has been going on for a while now.
He's a lot better of a passer than people want to give him credit for.
No. I get that. But ultimately, this actually has more to do with them than it does him. Yeah. If they can't run,
that's how they're built.
That's my point here. We're actually in agreement on this. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you're the Steelers, you focus on stopping them from running.
Yeah.
Whatever he does in the air, he's gonna get some stuff. He's gonna hit Mark Andrews. He's gonna hit a couple of other guys. He's gonna spring, even Henry downfield. Great. That's not gonna beat you. They have to beat you with their run.
They do, but that's why I'm saying the Ravens and Steelers are built very similarly, because the Steelers are very much built where if they don't run the football, they're not gonna win. They're not. Like, you're not gonna. There's Aaron Rodgers, a quarterback now, so it's a whole new dynamic, for better or worse. But even then, we just got done seeing. I'm 8 games into a Jets season in which they asked him. They were like, "Aaron, you're our savior. Go win us. Go save us." It's not who he is anymore. It's just
he doesn't need to be. That's not what I was suggesting. I was saying that we just don't know about this offense. What we do know is that over the last 5 years, with the exception of 3 games near the end of the 2023 season, there's not been any rhythm to this offense at all.
Yeah.
And there hasn't been you just feel like, hey, look, they're doing this, and then they're doing this. And now look, first down. Woohoo.
Well, there was for about, how many games was it?
With Russ?
Yep, from the Jets game.
There's nothing but trash defenses.
Right. I'll say from the Giants game the week after.
Trash.
Until which game was it? Really,
Cleveland.
Really, yeah. No, really through the Bengals game when he had the massive game against the Bengals. No, Cleveland afterward. That's right.
Cleveland.
After that, it all, because teams figured it out. Like, okay, it's go balls or it's layups. It's go balls or screens, or it's go balls or.
No, let's put a name to it. I mean, it's Jim Schwartz that did it. Jim Schwartz said he is. You know what? Hey, everybody, and by that I mean everybody in the NFL. Here's how you beat this.
Yeah,
and that's all he did. Because there wasn't that much difference between what Schwartz did. He just laid it out there, and we all knew it that night. We all knew it. We all knew it that the Steelers had been found out.
Yeah, because
it was the Ravens though that enunciated it though. Remember the Ravens talked about it openly.
Yeah, they talked about it.
I don't remember who it was.
It was one of their
Marlon Humphrey. It's Marlon Humphrey.
Well, I'm thinking of their coach. I don't know if it was a coach or an analytics guy or whoever
on the show
on Hard Knocks who said, yeah, like it's all layups and 3-pointers with this guy, which is all it was. There was no intermediate game, and once that was said, like light bulbs went off for the rest of the NFL. Being like, oh, okay, well, they're not going to. I mean, literally, and the thing is, the Steelers didn't change because they could not change because Russ isn't going to change. Russ didn't have one pass attempt, not completion, attempt between 11 and 20 yards downfield, the intermediate portion. Not one attempt in that playoff loss to the Ravens. It's insane. You can't win football games that way. You just can't.
No. Cody Craven says that Lamar is a great passer. He's not a great passer. I'm sorry. I'm not being the guy who bashes Lamar because of some perception from 4 or 5 years ago. He's not a great passer. Great is a strong adjective.
I would use great.
Huh?
I would use great.
Oh, no.
Yeah. He is, man. I'm gonna have to send you some data in a Slack DM later.
You can send me all the data that you want. I watch him pass. He's not a great passer. He just isn't.
Yeah.
James is with me. I don't know.
I just don't know.
Let's take a couple of more today. This one comes from Sean Grass. He asks, "But what's Jaire Alexander being brought in to do? Is he displacing Marlon Humphrey or Wiggins? If not, can he play slot?" The correct answer to that, Sean, is I don't care. I don't care about the Ravens at all. I brought them up here because, how they measure up against the Steelers and everything. They have added a talented player. What kind of usage they get out of him and whether somebody goes inside, outside, Humphrey's not new. He's going to have to, continue to show that he can play it, getting into his later years. I'm going to bypass that one to see if we can add one more question to, James Chamberlain says that Lamar has a great arm, but he's too inconsistent. Curtis Smith says that DK making Chris review Jets tapes sounds like employee abuse. If I was doing that, yeah.
He did not make me do anything. I chose to do that.
Yeah, I don't do a whole lot of that with anybody. Just do your job. That's it. The best of your ability. And plus, I mean, putting a human through something like that.
It's not been fun. I can tell you that right now.
Yeah.
The one thing I can actually take away from this entire series so far that I'm doing isn't even anything Aaron Rodgers related. I never want to hear anybody say that the Jets offensive line or that the Steelers offensive line was as bad as the Jets offensive line. I never want to hear that again. It's just not true. It's not. There's no well,
not to mention no running game. I mean,
their offensive line was.
I believe that this thing can be a factor. Did you know? I'm going to find this to verify this before I blurt it out loud. How many times Aaron Rodgers was sacked?
40.
That's what Ramon Foster was saying earlier today. I have never heard that number.
40 times. 40 times.
And so one for every year he's been alive.
Right. And not only was and the thing is, I'm 8 games into the season, and there's maybe only been a handful in which I'm like, yeah, that's totally on the quarterback. Other times it's either off timing with receiver or literally the offensive line cannot handle a stunt. They're incapable of it. I have yet to see the Jets actually properly block a stunt this entire time. Maybe it's happened. I haven't seen it. I don't know.
We really need to do an entire show just about how bad the other Jets suck.
Oh my God.
That's also relevant for another pretty big reason. Okay. I mean, they're the first opponent.
Cody asked, how bad was it? Dude, I'm telling you, it was so bad. Literally, they are incapable of handling just a basic stunt from the defensive line. This is not some new age concept. This is something that's been around for decades, and they couldn't block it. They just couldn't. There was another time in this game I just did where they had 2 edge rushers down, and then this one big, like 350-pound guy standing over the center, literally standing. And then they had a couple other guys lurking, and you're like, they're not only rushing 3. This is going to be some sort of disguised blitz. And then their center and 2 guards all blocked the dude who was standing up while the linebacker just ran right past him in a 4-man rush, not even a blitz, a 4-man rush. And Rodgers got hit unimpeded. Like, it's so bad. They're so bad.
We hate football teams in New Jersey. Let's be clear on that. When we come back, we're going to take care of a little bit of business here on the Double Shot of Steelers. So yeah, we have. Whoa! What is this all about? Hans drops by.
Woo!
And he just says, you know what? Here's a 50. Look at that. 50 gifts. I don't know where our number is right now. We're gonna check with the boss. She's back, by the way, which is why this is run so smoothly. Huh?
2203.
Oh, really? Wow, we've really dropped off then. She says 2203. Ooh, somber tone. The goal was to get to 3,000. That's looking increasingly challenging, shall we say.
Yeah.
To get to 3,000 by the reporting day for training camp, which is in about a month and 5 days. Yeah, I don't think we're doing this. The place to go, if you want to prove me wrong, is dkps.net/join. We'll be nice to you if you're nice to us. That's the perks here. Hans dropped a 50. The PEF has been a member for 25 months, and yet so much more. Rico dropped $20. That was earlier in the show here. Eugene with 1 gift. Carrie with 1 as well. And man, this one bears leaving up on the screen here. That's Hans with 50 there. So if you see a gift, you get to have the gift and you're a member for a month, and then it just expires.
Yeah. You unfortunately have to wait until your membership expires and then go and pretty much re-up. It's not something you can do after you're already. It's weird how that happens.
Yeah, and you can't get future gifts either.
Yeah.
Like, in other words, if you take one of these 50 from Hans, great. But that's it. Hans's generosity has its limits.
Yeah.
Oh, boy. Josh just dropped a 5 in on us here late. So, yeah, one more time. dkps.net/join is the place to go. Appreciate everybody who's been with us today. A reminder that we will not have a program on Friday for a couple of very, very different reasons. Mine is personal. Chris is going to be heading over to cover the ball game, talk about hazard pay.
Yeah.
Huh?
You're on tomorrow.
Off what?
But you will have one tomorrow.
Oh, yeah, we have. She wants me to remind everybody that we do have a show tomorrow because the sky is also blue. So, yes, we do have a show tomorrow. Both of us will be here tomorrow, but not Friday. So that's the point that we're making here. So we'll see you guys tomorrow.